What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Off the Ball podcast with me, your host, Chris LeBron. And I'm doing something different. I started up a new series. It's going to be called The Best That Never Was. So, in this series, we're going to essentially break down the best teams in NBA history to never win an NBA title. So, for the first episode, I got a special guest with me too. One of my guys, one of my favorite creators out here. I got my guy Will Lyons. What's going on, my brother?
Chris, what's going on, man? I'm excited to be here. You know, I got love for the OTB family.
Yes, yes, and we appreciate the love, man. You always show love, and we always appreciate it. And you do some great stuff too. So today's show, man. I mean, for the first episode, I know I had to get you on, man. We've been trying to do this for a minute, so I couldn't have asked for a better person to be on for this one. So for the debut episode of The Best That Never Was, we're gonna break down that that 2011 2012 Oklahoma City Thunder team, one of the biggest what if teams in NBA history. It's such a polarizing team, and obviously we know super stacked from with future MVPs. I mean, just to think about this team is like wow. Like at one point they had three MVPs on this team. It's really remarkable, you know, how good this team could have been if they had kept the band together, because right
Definitely.
after the season, Harden gets traded to the Rockets, and this team isn't the same. So before we get in depth, we'll just give me some your thoughts about this team.
I mean, it's tough, man, because as you know, OKC fan. So one of my favorite teams I've ever watched, man. Incredibly, talented, versatile. You know, you had like a baby Westbrook, extremely dynamic before any of the knee injuries. You know, you had KD, that's KD, man, one of the best to ever put the ball in the basket. You know, Ibaka, you know what I'm saying? Like at that time, growing his game, that pure mid range, but that defensive player of the year type of impact. And then Harden, man, like before he was Mister 30-point triple double on the regular. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then even the supporting cast, man. You know, you had Kendrick Perkins. You had guys coming off the bench like a Daquan Cook and just some
Mhm.
other guys, man. It was a
Derek
really
Fisher, like they had
yes,
some.
like veteran leadership, to go along with, talented young cast. And like you said, man, three MVPs, like you'll never see that type of, talent together at one time again, man.
Especially all drafted. Like it's one thing
Yes.
to have three MVPs because you trade for one like the Nets have and all that, but to draft like
Right.
three back to back to, I mean, what was it, 3 and 4 years? Like they
Yep.
drafted these guys, and you know, and it wasn't like KD. All right, KD was like a given, right? We knew
Yeah.
KD was going to be that dude, but Westbrook, I remember coming in out of college, like he was a defender. People were
Hmm.
talking about like questioning his offensive game, and Harden was another one where we weren't really sure how good he would be. Like maybe he'd be a very solid offensive player, but
Right.
we didn't think he'd be this good. So it's kind of crazy how like everything how it turned out these the individuals' careers. We're talking about
Hmm.
three MVPs, three Hall of Famers, right? And three of the top maybe 50 players of all time when it's all said and done. Like this is we like we said, we may not see this ever again where a team drafts three MVPs
Yeah.
in such a short span. Like it doesn't happen, and it
No.
might not happen again. Like
And
that's
Chris, like one of the things, man, like going back to what you were saying about Westbrook, as I'm a big Westbrook guy, man, but like I just want to, bring this point home. Westbrook didn't even play point guard in college, you
no.
know. So to go from that to, an all NBA caliber floor general and Harden, we knew he could score, but going
Mhm.
from six man of the year. Obviously, he didn't do it in OKC, but to turn into an MVP, like the development and that scouting department and front office, man, you just got to take your hat off to him.
Yeah, and it's so just a little like recap of this. This was the shortened season.
Yep.
So the year before, they have a tremendous season, and like I said, they're babies. They're babies. 22 years old, most of these guys. KD year before, 22 years old. Westbrook was 22. Serge is 21. James is 21. And they have a really good season, 55 wins. They lose to Dallas in 5 in the conference finals. So going into the season, obviously we have the strike shortened season. So we don't know if the season's even going to happen. So we finally get the season going. And they just have a absolutely tremendous season. I mean, I remember looking at everything, and they only had one 3-game losing streak the whole season. Like they were pretty good, and like you got KD who's going into back-to-back scoring championships. He wins his 3rd this season. At 23 years old, all NBA first team this season. Right? They go 47-19, win a division by 9 games. Well, 9 games, so they just dominated. They dominated, and I think this is why people were so like, this is a dynasty in the making, because they're dominating the West, right? And we still have Dallas, right? And Dallas, we know what Dallas does. They did the year before. We still got the Lakers, still got the Spurs. So the West is still the West. So, and they're doing this with such a young team. Westbrook, 23 years old, makes the All NBA second team for the 2nd straight year. Serge Ibaka is an All NBA first teamer, 2nd in Defensive Player of the Year. I think he was 2nd behind Tyson Chandler, I believe. And James Harden was a 6th Man of the Year, and he ran away with that, like averaging almost 17 a game. And it's crazy. Like you look at Westbrook, and now you see his game now, but you look at his game back then. Same thing with Harden. It's like it just, and Ibaka too. Like you look at Ibaka shooting, like I was like, all right, I got to see the 3-point. Like, and you see he's only taken a couple. Now that's what he's known for, is being like a stretch 4. And then obviously KD is, I mean, he's KD. He's been KD since the jump. 3 at this point. I mean, he's 23 years old and got 3 straight. He got 3 straight scoring titles, and he's runner up in MVP for another season. So I mean, they were special. They led the league in blocks per game. It was. Man, this team was just so much fun to watch. Day in and day. Like I said, only one 3-game losing streak. Players of the week, NBA players of the month. This team just everything you like excite, and it was homegrown. Opposite of what the team they'll face, eventually down the road. Which, they had Wade, but obviously this is the Heatles, 2nd year, after losing the previous year to the Dallas Mavericks. So I think people were like, wow. How did Sam Presti do this? How did he get all? And then they get Kendrick Perkins. They get the year before in Boston. So you get these little pieces. Derek Fisher. So you're like, wow, this team's here for 10 years.
Right.
And then obviously we know how it ends. But for Will, like, just talk about just how exciting this team was watching, because I mean, he got Harden come off the bench. He started at this point. He probably would have been already a 25 point per game guy if he was starting on any other team. So they got Harden come off the bench. Ibaka, that core could have that core, man. That could have been something special, absolutely special.
It's nuts, man. And obviously hindsight is 2020, but if I'm a front office guy, I don't know how you don't just pay Harden, man. Like, you literally, like you said, you'd be set for at least 10 years, man. But looking back, that team was incredibly fun, because that's in that time period where a lot of the criticism on Westbrook came into play. Like late game decision making and not deferring and stuff. But the thing that I love, watching Russ, like, he doesn't back down. He's always coming at you, and over time, he's had to learn to, play a little more with pace. But at that time, too, he was shooting the ball at a pretty decent clip. If you look in the mid-range, that's when he was coming down the court, full speed and just stop and pop midi, right at the elbow. And that, that was money. Or if you don't force him to take that pull-up, he's putting it on your head at the rim, And at that time, you had the argument of who was the most athletic guy between him and, D Rose, So then you have, KD, 30 in his sleep, and you surround them with an intriguing cast, because even the guys who were the role players, they excelled in their role. Thabo Cephalosha, he was a good, veteran piece that would play some lockdown defense and catch you slipping at the rim too, and finish and hit the occasional three. I mean, I feel like I would feel like I won the lottery, man, when he would hit a three. He was such a streaky guy. But then, you got Perk, and I would say I feel like OKC fans at the time of the move, they understood the move, but it hurt that fan base to see Jeff Green go. One of their, one of
Yes.
their guys, but as much as Perk is looked at differently now, he did help change, the trajectory of that team. He gave them what they were missing in the paint. Because when you look back at some of those other teams, you had guys like Nenad Kristic and stuff, man. You know what I mean? No disrespect, he's still an NBA player, but you had a real paint presence that didn't need the ball, and I think his mentality along with Cephalosha allowed for the other three guys to really flourish. When you have three ball dominant guys like that.
Yep, and they needed that enforcer. He
Oh
did
yeah.
that when he was in Boston. Him and KG, and they needed that because they were such a young team, like babies. We're talking about 22, 23-year-olds, and yes, they are, emerging superstars, but they're just still young. So
Yeah.
they needed that big dog to help, clear up the paint and all that. And, they had Derek Fisher, obviously he was towards the back end of his career, obviously, but having that veteran like him on the team. And I mean, they had a baby, Reggie Jackson. It was a rookie season, Reggie Jackson. And it shows Presti was just, man, he was just hitting everything.
Yeah.
Every year he was hitting, and he was hitting gold. Like he hit the lottery every year. I mean, to get KD, Russ, James Harden, that shows that, scouting was on point, because like we mentioned before, KD was probably a given, right? That doesn't take too much. That was kind of obvious, right?
Yeah.
Greg Oden goes one, you taking KD, but Russ, like we mentioned before, Russ wasn't a guarantee. Harden wasn't a guarantee. Finding guys like Reggie Jackson and making those little trades, to get a Kendrick, Perkins and all that. And, it just felt like everything was going. I mean, KD, 28 a game that year. Whatever we see now is what we saw then, like efficient KD shooting close to 50% from the field, free throws at a high clip, 80%, high 80s, 90%. 3-pointers close to 40%. I mean, he was all NBA first team, an all-star. And then this is Russ's like second year of like, okay, this we were seeing him more develop into his offensive game, which, like we mentioned before, wasn't something he was known for coming out of college at UCLA. It was like he's an athletic guard who plays defense, which is kind of crazy, right? That was his scouting report, that he's a defender. And now you see his game now that it's like, wow, like how did they get that wrong? Like that whole scouting report, like this, like, and at this point we didn't see the triple doubles, right? He was around like 5-6 rebounds, 5-6 assists.
Yep.
The points were getting up, and he was averaging, I think he averaged around 23, 24 this year. And like I said, Serge doing his thing defensively. I mean, he's coming into his own year 3, being the anchor. And it's crazy how his game changed. Like you mentioned before, like he's now like a stretch 4 now, where he before, like at around this time, he's in the paint, he's banging with people, he's blocking shots, and he was an all NBA first teamer, and like I said, James Harden, 6th man of the year. And it's just, Scott Brooks was the hottest coach in the league. He was that hot coach. Everybody was like, this is going to be the next it coach, right? And like I said, like I mentioned before, they dominate the division, right? They win by 9 games. I think Denver finished second, and like I said, they won that. They cleared that by 9 games. And like coming off the season they had the year before, they were confident, and they were as confident as you could be for a young team like that. So and so they go into the playoffs, and they're playing the defending champs round 1. They smoke them. They smoke them. Sweep. They sweep. Now there was some close games, but they still swept them. And do you remember anything of that first round series versus Dallas, between OKC and Dallas?
Man, when I think about that series, one play in particular, like it just plays over and over in my mind, man. Like, KD slashed through the lane, getting to the rim putting that 7-footer. I want to say I think it was Mahimi in the basket. I
Oh,
could be wrong.
Yamahimi. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And I feel like that just kind of summarized that series. Like it was a competitive series, but overall, it was a bad matchup for Dallas. Like, Dirk was Dirk. But when you look at the other pieces, that athleticism, that youth, was poison for that Mavericks team.
Hmm.
It really was like nothing they could do, man. Like, because you like the way Russ played at that time, you can't scheme for it. You know what I mean?
No,
Like, he's either he's taking a slower, Jason Kidd, and you assume he's going to the basket, boom, pull up, money. You know what I'm saying? All right, cool. I'm gonna plan for the jumper this time at the rim, easy. You know what I mean? Then you had an incredibly effective, pick and pop with Surge. It's just like they literally were able to kind of just pick their spots. It was like I'm not gonna say it was a guarantee, but you see matchups where it's like a true dogfight. This was a competitive series, but I feel like OKC had never had doubt that they could beat them, and they wanted payback because Dallas knocked them out the year before.
exactly,
You
exactly.
know, and with KD, one thing that carried him throughout the whole season, that lockout. I know you remember those matchups that they had in the summertime. You
Ooh, yep.
know,
Those are
and
fun.
KD was matched up with LeBron every single time.
Hmm.
He was getting ready, I feel like, for war. He knew what the year would be like. And it showed, man. His confidence was like sky high, just rolling throughout the whole year. And sadly, Dallas just had to deal with that.
Yeah, I just think Dallas was coming off the high of obviously, win the championship, and they just didn't have enough.
Mhm.
And like you said, it was a close for pretty much, other than I think game 3 was, I think, the biggest blowout. Every other game was a one possession game, I believe,
Yeah.
1-2 possession game. And I just think Dallas, whatever helped them get to the finals last year, they couldn't recap that magic again because they had to rely on the same crew. And it's like,
Mhm.
Jason Terry, and they didn't have that second option where, we're talking about Oklahoma City. You got KD. If KD's not on, you got, they had Russ. Russ not on, they had James. So Dallas just that magic just couldn't replicate,
Yeah.
again this season. And like I said, it was a competitive series, but Oklahoma City showed that okay, they got their revenge. They swept the defending champs, and they were off to the next round to play the Los Angeles Lakers and Kobe and the crew, and they won the winning that series in 5. So I mean, not that it was an easy road to the finals, but they took care of business. They
Yes.
only lost 3
Mhm.
games heading into the finals, so they did their thing, and now they're playing Kobe and the Lakers, and they take care of business. Do you remember anything from this series in particular?
I just felt like this was so the Dallas series. It was like all right, here we go. They may be able to do something, but that Lakers series, I feel like that was when that they really have a chance to do something special in the postseason. Because when you talk about that Lakers team and the way they were built, you know, it wasn't always just the numbers, the box scores that killed you. It was that grit, that
Mhm.
mentality, starting with Kobe, and the way he and Powell had that, phenomenal 2-man game. And then,
Mhm.
they were tough defensively too, and they,
Yep,
they would
yep.
beat you up the entire game, that true veteran type of game. You know what I mean? It was like playing at the YMCA. You getting those
Yep.
elbows.
Oh,
You
they
know?
have. I mean, Matt Barnes and Meta will do that to
Yes,
you, man. And
yes.
and then you got those big boys. You got Powell and Bynum.
Mhm.
That is, that team was tough. That Lakers
Yes.
team was tough.
And KD is KD. But this series, I remember this is when you're looking at Westbrook and Harden. Like, man, these guys can literally get anything they want out there. And there was good defenders. I mean, like it just was like they were in like just a zone, man. And like Harden, he looked like he was in a rucker. The way he was dancing with the ball, exploiting the mismatches, hitting the step back threes that he became known for. And then Russ, like at that time, Russ was like kind of slender built, but he still
Mhm.
played very physical. But to think that the point guard is the most physically, uh, dominant dude, out there. You know what I mean? Like it was amazing to watch, man. And I feel like that was when those three guys, they really got the nod from Kobe. It's like they were young pups before, but it's like, all right, they here now.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And I think it was game 4 where KD and Russ just absolutely go bonkers. They go
Mhm.
crazy. And I think what Oklahoma City did good in this series was, Kobe's going to be Kobe, right? He's going to
Yeah.
get his points, but making sure he's not efficient, right? You got to keep him, make sure he's shooting in the low 30s, and they did that in this series.
Mhm.
And simply the Lakers had no one to really contain Russ. They just didn't have that. They didn't have. I mean, you got Steve Blake. Steve Blake, solid pro,
Yeah.
but just let's just be real. Let's just keep it a buck. Well,
Yeah.
like it is. This is young. This is a young Westbrook. In his prime, and you got James too. But like, KD came out and just took over, and
Mhm.
they took care of business against this Lakers. This is a tough Lakers team defensively. There was some ugly games. I think Game 3 was like 77 to like 74 or something crazy
Mhm.
like that. It was a low
Oh, yeah,
scoring
game
game.
2. Yep.
It was an ugly game. No
Mhm.
one played good. That
Yeah.
was an ugly game, very ugly. Nobody played well, but they won up script and they went in 5.
Mhm.
They beat a tough Lakers team. This is a team that's coming off back to back not too long ago.
Yeah.
So they just come off beating the defending champions who they lost to the previous year, beat the back to back champions, a couple years back,
Mhm.
and now they're taking on the Spurs.
Yeah.
Now they got to go handle the Spurs and company and their dynasty and all that, and they wound up winning in 6 games. So talk to me a little bit about this series, because like I said, they did their thing, but I mean that's a gauntlet. Will,
It
you got
is
to go through Dallas,
3
the defending
champions.
champs. That's 3 championships right there in what, 5 years,
Yep.
and you got the Spurs.
Mhm.
You know,
So this is crazy because when you think about the San Antonio series, they went down 0-2. And
mm-hmm.
typically, man, that's a death sentence, especially with a experienced team. With 3 guys, 3
Mm-hmm.
Hall of Famers. Ginobili, Tony Parker, Tim Duncan. You got arguably the greatest NBA coach. You know what I'm saying, out there. You go down 0-2, man. It's supposed to be lights out.
Especially for a young team like them, especially for a
Definitely,
young team like that can get you down.
definitely. And then I'm like looking at the game scores. Most teams they fold. Game 3 they'd have lost that too. They come out in San Antonio. No, I'm sorry, in OKC, and they won by 20.
Yep.
You know, and then the other games in the series were closer, but this is when I just remember Harden putting on a masterclass, man, exploiting the pick and roll, killing every mismatch he created. Like they still show, the step backs, to this day, and it's just like seeing these guys and the basketball ability, the athleticism, all of that is amazing in itself. But seeing that they don't mail it in like a young team normally would,
Mm-hmm.
they don't hang their heads. They look at it, they're like, man, hold on, who have we just beat? We beat Dirk. We sent Kobe home. We belong here. We can do this, and we gave these guys some work in the regular season too.
Yep.
And they send them boys home. It's not a sweep, but to win 4 straight in the NBA playoffs, man, after losing 2, man, it's crazy. Like, and to ride into, like a finals, like off of something like that. It was really like a beautiful thing to see, man.
Yeah, and I think this is Kawhi's rookie year, right? I think this is
Yep.
Kawhi's rookie season. So this wasn't the Kawhi that we obviously see now, and even who won Finals MVP. What, a few years after that.
Right.
So they kept him in check. They didn't let him go
Mm-hmm.
off. Timmy had some good games. Ginobili in Game 4 went off, but like you said, to play a veteran team like this and go down 0-2, I mean, that's a death sentence. Like you're done. You're toast, especially against a pop team.
Oh yeah.
And you got Tony Parker, Ginobili, and Timmy, doing their thing. Steven Jackson, was on this squad. So for them to overcome that, I think that's what people were like. I think they could do this.
Yep.
They could win it, because we saw Miami the year before and how LeBron got in check, held in check, and they were like, I mean, they got KD, Russ, Harden, getting good play from Kendrick, some solid veteran leadership from Derek Fisher, and man, they can do this. They could beat the Miami. So, because I mean, like and we mentioned before, the gauntlet,
Mhm.
Dallas, LA, Spurs, they could beat the Heat, and guess what? They go to the finals. Game one, they win game one. So it's like, oh, this a dynasty. Oh no,
Mhm.
forget the Heatles, forget Miami. This is the dynasty that we need to be talking about. They win game one. It's like, oh, okay, this team's here. They're gonna take over. It's they're gonna win 3 and 4 in a row. You know how my LeBron was like, not one, not two, not three. I mean, I think they might have meant that for KD and company. Like KD gonna be the face of the league.
Yeah.
Like this is his league. And they win game one by what, 11 points.
Yep.
And then they just couldn't finish it out. They
Mhm.
couldn't figure out how to finish this team out.
Yeah.
Talk to me about this, because essentially it was a gentleman's sweep by
Yeah.
Miami. They obviously Miami the year before they lose to Dallas, and it was it's one of the craziest series we've seen because LeBron just he just did not look like LeBron. Like he
Mhm.
looked lost out there. And then we see this Dallas team has their superstar, but they got a bunch of role players. They got their role players. Jason Kidd, Jason Terry, those guys, JJ Barea, those guys are taking over. And it's like LeBron, Bosh, Wade, they couldn't figure it out. So talk to me about this. Like we mentioned, Thunder, they take game one and they look good. Let's face it, they look good. They took care of business, and they wound up, losing 4 straight and not taking care of business and losing in 5. So talk to me about, this series and what you thought about, the outcome of this.
So, man, I'll tell you, game one, I'm ready to order my championship gear, man. Like, man, we about to get a championship, man. Them boys about to get it done. They just came out guns firing, man. And like KD has 36 in his first NBA Finals game. Like, what I mean? It's like unheard of. And I mean, even the role players like, are hooping. Like Nick Collison had like 10 boards.
Yep.
Russ had, 11 assists. And you just looking at it like, man, like I know Miami's good, but this blend of talent and youth, like sometimes you're too young to know better. And, I thought that would, alleviate OKC of nerves, and it'd be like, look, man, we just going to come out here and hoop. We don't know nothing else,
Yep.
And I would say they did, but it just is tough, man. When you look at, there's this Miami team, how many, finals appearances in a row, and then it's the worst case scenario, right? You're dealing with a LeBron who was just humiliated in front of the entire world, so now he's going to do anything it takes to get that ring. You still have a pretty healthy D Wade, Chris Bosh, the ultimate 4-man, / small ball 5, at that time, and a damn good cast, guys. Pat Riley could go out on the street and find a guy who could randomly hit 5 threes. Like the way they were building that team, man, it was tough. But even in defeat, like OKC was showing the world a lot, and like you look at it, for example, game 4, right? They lose by 6. KD, not having the best game. Harden, honestly, for the majority of the series, kind of a no-show.
Yeah, he wasn't great. Russ went off that one.
Russ had 43, a top 5 scoring game in NBA Finals history. You know what I mean? Like, and it just shows you, it's like, man, they're here to stay, and you can argue, as far as like this time frame of the NBA, outside of LeBron getting swept by the Spurs, this was the most league altering loss, in a long time, because there's no way you think when they lose, James Harden's out of there. You assume they get the extension done and they're right back in the finals the next year. You're like, man, we'll be back in the finals 3-4 more times. Easy.
Easy. Will this was like, oh, all right, we're gonna see Miami versus OKC for
Mm-hmm.
it. Like we saw Cavs and Warriors four
Right.
straight years. Like, oh, we're gonna see this for as long as LeBron's with Miami and KD. We're gonna see this for we're gonna back to back. We're gonna see it again, and it didn't happen.
Yep.
It didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Will and you know games 2, 3, 4 were competitive, and in game 5, Miami just was like, hey,
Time to get this over
they
with.
weren't losing. We knew it was like, all right, LeBron got this. There's no way that there's no thought of like a 3-1. Nah, it's not happening. They took care of business and win by 15. And Miami is your world champions. LeBron wins his first ring. Bosh wins his first ring for the Heatles and all that. We see the emotional, LeBron being emotional, but daps up KD and the crew, and it's like we might be like, oh, this is gonna be this is Larry versus Magic. This is gonna be it, and these teams. This is Boston versus the Lakers. This is what we're gonna see for a long time. And like we
Yep.
mentioned, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It doesn't end that way. We see James Harden get dealt to the Rockets for. If we look back at that trade now, we're like, wow, like fleeced isn't even the word.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just wasn't a fair trade. You did not get the value. Now, obviously, we didn't know James was going to be what he was now. Like this is a guy who's an MVP. I think he finished second in the MVP like 12 times. It feels like, this man is probably should have been like a 3-4 time MVP, leading, 36 a game. I mean, and 3-4 scoring titles, whatever he has. One of the best players in the league, going to be the Hall of Famer. And essentially and it's crazy how much the game has changed, because if we do that now, if this is OKC 2021, you're keeping James, and Ibaka's the one that leaves.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You don't even, that's not even like a thought, right? You're like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, whatever. Like, we can find an Ibaka. But back in this, this is 2012. The game is still, kind of, it's very different. It's not the game it is now. So you have KD, you have Russ, right? And they're more established than Harden is. You're like, all right, we need Ibaka. That's what you need. You need that guy who could block shots and defend. So at the time, you're like, okay, I get what they're doing, but obviously we don't know James is going to be James, and hindsight being 2020, you obviously don't make that move, and you give Harden the max, and you don't even, and you have your big three, and maybe you run it back and you win it all the next year, but that doesn't happen. So like this series is called the best that ever was. This team has to be one of the biggest what ifs in NBA, not even forget NBA history, sports history. That's why I wanted to start off with this team, because this team is so, like, when I think of teams that should have had greatness and won championships, this team in particular comes into mind, because it was like, all right, they had their moment. It's kind of like Miami the year before, where they had to get humbled.
Mm-hmm.
Right? OKC got humbled. They're gonna come back. They're gonna run it back, and they're gonna get the job done next year. And it didn't happen. So, just talk to me about like the what ifs about this team if they do choose to keep Harden. Like just talk to me about it, because it just, like I said, this team is so intriguing, and that's why I had to start off with this, with episode 1 for the best that never was. So just talk to me about everything about the aftermath of losing in 5 in the finals, and then just what happened after that.
So I would say the first thing, that you were talking about, for example, Ibaka. Looking at the way the game was played, I feel like they're looking at it like you got to have that big man. He's like a perfect modern big man. And I think because of the, improvements he had made season after season, they thought there was going to be like a bigger leap, and he could become that true third piece for them.
Mm-hmm.
And Serge ended up being a really good player, but really just like a top flight role player,
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But, you end up shipping out a superstar, and you can't recover from that. I know they thought bringing in Kevin Martin and a young Jeremy Lamb, you can offset that. Kevin Martin can score, but Harden it was like a generational guy. When you talk about a combo guard, he can run the offense for you, can pass, can score, anything really that you need him to do. A better post defender. there's just no way you get that trade value back.
No.
You know, and then when you look at
Let
like
me just go through the trade because this trade is
Chris, you
Will.
about to make me cry, man.
It's all right. So Jane, obviously they don't work out the extension. The trade is they trade him to Houston. They acquire Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and they sent out also Cole Aldridge, Daquan Cook, and Lazar Hayward. That's like we said. All right, we don't know James is going to be James, but there was kind of a feeling like, okay, if you let him unleash,
Hmm.
he could be an all-star. Right? I think we saw all-star, right?
Yeah,
Obviously,
definitely.
we didn't know if he gonna how good he would be, right? We knew he'd
Right.
be good. There's levels to it. Like MVP is something
Hmm.
I don't know we thought, but still, like that kind of even when the trade happened, it did feel like it was definitely not, it was undervalued for him,
Hmm.
because this he just won 6 man of the year, by a landslide, so over Lou Will. So it felt like the value wasn't there, but deal was made. They felt like Kevin Martin was a good player, right? Solid player. Kind of felt like, all right, we keep Ibaka. We got a solid piece in Kevin Martin who could be that kind of fill in for James. But obviously, it just we found out quick that this wasn't the same value. James is on is going to be an MVP and on another planet,
Hmm.
and the value you got in return was just was was doo doo
Yeah.
essentially.
And that ends up being even bigger when you look at like future seasons in OKC because it seemed like Russ and KD ended up just taking turns having like long stretches of games missed with
Mhm.
injuries,
Yeah, yeah.
whether it's in the postseason or the regular season.
Mhm.
And if you just like playing a what if game, if you look back, okay, Russ is out, you still have James Harden and KD, and all the other
Yep.
guys, or
Mhm.
KD's out, you still got Russ and Harden and all the other guys. It's a totally different game because at that time, outside of Miami, you still could go pretty far with just two really good guys,
Yep.
and losing Harden, man, it was tough because you bring back Kevin Martin on paper, yeah, he can score, but then he was starting to get hurt a lot. He was aging, Um, he never really performed up to the contract. Then you had Perkins getting paid a decent salary. He started getting injured. Man,
Mhm.
injuries and that trade literally like crippled OKC. And I know they won a lot of regular season games and had some fun memories, man. But overall, when you look at what should have been, this team stands next to and Shaq's Orlando Magic.
That's a good comparison.
Right to 30 myself. You know what I mean? Like that's how much what if potential this team had.
You know what? That might be the best comparison. Is that Orlando team that lost to Hakeem?
Mhm.
That's a great comparison because after that it was not the same. And this OKC team, they go back the next year and they lose in the second round. Did they lose to Memphis?
Yeah, I think
Memphis,
it
yeah,
was Memphis. Yep, because
yeah, and they lose in five. They lose in five to Memphis,
that's when I
and
think was it KD got hurt. KD or Russ got hurt. One of them.
who got? Yeah, you're right. One of them got hurt. Was it KD? Did
I
he get
think
hurt?
so.
I
I'm
believe
trying,
KD had the foot, right? Did KD have the foot injury?
I believe that is the foot because Russ was still pretty healthy at that time. That's before the
Yeah,
Pat Beverly incident.
yeah. So KD has the injury, and then this team just isn't the same.
Mhm.
And you know, we all think that, and like just to go back, but you think this team's going to be here for the next decade, and they make the Harden trade, and even though they made the trade, and as controversial that was, you were still confident that all right, still got Russ and KD, they're on the up and up, all right, and you got Ibaka, you got some nice pieces that they could still do some work and potentially win a championship, and then just obviously they get close a few years after that, with playing against the Warriors being up 3-1, and we all know how that ends, and that's going to lead up to another episode, talking about that Warriors team, of the best that never was, but and then it's over. you know KD leaves, and then little couple years after that, it's crazy how everything led to their big three version, and then we see how this OKC team is now, and it's like, wow, what could have been? What could have been? We could have potentially seen a dynasty, but it did not in that end. And I'm sorry, and I know this probably hurts you, Will. I know this team's near and dear to your heart, but if there's someone who knows pain at year in year out is me being a Knicks fan. So I know the pain, but I know for you this hurts because you didn't just have good players, you had MVP
Mm-hmm.
Hall of Famers on this team, and we just didn't get to see them fully
Yep.
get that shot to go at it again and see what they really could have done. But this is definitely one of the best teams to never have won a championship, and one of the most polarizing teams because of the talent they had and Presti's ability to, like we said, define these three. Not KD, like we know KD, but to take a chance on Russ, take a chance on James Harden, where people were like, oh, maybe those guys are going too high. Trade for a Kendrick Perkins and just draft the way he drafted. But this team is definitely one of the greatest teams to never win a championship, and it's one of the most polarizing teams, like I mentioned before. It's a fun team to evaluate, to go back and research, because the accolades they had this year. I mean, Scott Brooks could have possibly won Coach of the Year too. I think Pop won the Coach of the Year, so they could have swept a bunch of awards this year.
Mm-hmm.
KD finished second in the MVP. I think Ibaka was second in Defensive Player of the Year. They could have swept everything. They could have took all the hardware,
Man.
But the number one hardware they wanted, they weren't able to get. But that doesn't. The run was still impressive. No matter what, the run is impressive because they beat some dogs. They beat the defending champions. They beat the Lakers, who not too long ago, just a few years back, won back-to-back championships. They beat the Spurs, and we know the Spurs legacy. Winning all them championships with Tim Duncan, Ginobili, Pop, Manu, and then they lost to Miami. Let's face it. It's not like they lost to some rant. They lost to Miami Heat. LeBron James was coming off a year where this was a big year for him in order to get it done. They lost the year before, so a absolutely fun team to break down in the first episode of the Best That Never Was, recapping the 2011-2012 OKC Thunder with my guy Will. But Will, man, this was a pleasure, brother. It was fun breaking down this team. Like I said, one of the best teams to never have won a championship. Any final thoughts on this team before we sign off?
Man, it's crazy just looking back in hindsight, man. I can appreciate, the highs and the lows, man. It was just a great team to watch, man. And it's given, like, just I'm glad that, and I can appreciate you, for spotlighting this team, because, I feel like there's been so many teams that you could argue, that would be a best that never was, So for my guys, man, to get their just due, they didn't get a ring, so this is the closest they're gonna get, to that praise. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you for having me, man, allowing me to chop it up. We long overdue, man. We've been chopping it up on the timeline, and support this content for a long time. So I'm glad to finally lock in with you, bro.
For sure. And when I thought about this concept, and I was like, I got to get Will on. Will got to be the first guest on this, the Best That Never Was. We got to talk about this OKC team, because, like I said, I wanted to really dive into this team and this season and break it down. But like I said, it was long overdue.
Yes,
I'm happy that we were able to chop it up and talk about this OKC Thunder team. I know it hurts. Man. But but it was fun chopping it up with you and talking about one of the best teams to never win a championship. But Will, my brother, like I said, it was a pleasure chopping it up with you and talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder, the 2012 team that lost to Miami in the finals. But you have anything you want to promote? Let the people know where they can find you. Any projects you got coming up? I know you got a lot of things, a lot of great stuff you've been doing. So let the people know where they can find you and any work you have.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, man. So now over with Baldwin, it's a Medium publication. Baldwin, So black owner operated, magazine. And one thing that they didn't have was a sports section, so that's why I'm in, I'm the sports editor over there. So, just, building our team, our roster, trying to just keep up the content that people, know me for, and working on also on a little, I'm gonna have to do it like a slight rebrand. There's like, the podcast, but I'm gonna still be launching that, the Lions Den. I had a few episodes in the tuck, but I think I'm gonna have to just hold the vault and start over, man. And I'm gonna have to have you on there for sure, brother.
Hey, I'm always down, brother. You just gotta hit me up. I'm ready.
Yes, sir. And the people can find me, man. Twitter, Instagram, it's the same handle. WJL1691. And hey, the easiest way to explain it, man, we working, brother.
Yep, that's definitely what we're doing, man. And this is the first pod I've done. I haven't done one in like a few weeks. Started a new job. We're overnights. It's been kicking my butt, but like I said, I'm happy to be back podding, and like no better way to get back than chopping up with you on this. But I appreciate you, brother, once again. Like I said, make sure to go follow Will. I'll have all his social media links posted in the description. Um on the YouTube and all that. So appreciate you, Will. Make sure that you can follow me off the ball pod on Twitter, off the ball podcast on Instagram, Facebook. Make sure to follow, sub to the off the ball network YouTube page that this will be being posted on soon. Make sure to follow all my guys at Off the Ball Network. We killing it over there. Great content, on the daily. So offtheballnetwork.com. Make sure to follow OTB_network on Twitter, Off the Ball Network on Instagram, all that good stuff. Got more in store. Working on the second episode of the Best Than Ever Was. So make sure to tune into me on Twitter, and I'll drop what team will be breaking down. But this is like I said, Will, pleasure for the debut episode of the Best Than Ever Was, covering the 2011-2012 OKC Thunder. On that note, guys, be well, be safe, take care, be kind to each other, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Best Than Ever Was. Peace out, guys.